In this Tuesday group for a little while, we're going to feature zodiac signs in depth by studying the expressions of them. This idea that a batch of five Sabian symbols or 5 degrees creates its own energy form, and there are 6 of them within a sign. This whole idea came from Dane Rudhyar. Now, he didn't take it as far as he could have taken it, and what was missing was the naming of the expressions. So one of the things I did a few years ago was to look at the Sabian symbols and look at the zodiac sign and just try and come up with a name for this batch of 5 degrees, which we're calling expressions. So when we study Virgo, the first 5 degrees, for example, the name of the expression is conviction. Now, if we think about how we are studying astrology, we tend to assume that because we are, in my case, Taurus, that the other zodiac signs don't apply to us. Not true. Every single one of the 12 zodiac signs is a part of unity. And the higher we get in consciousness, the closer we get to being able to embrace all there is to embrace. So not only can we say that we are able to express each of the energies of the 12 zodiac signs, we can obviously prefer our own. We find it much more easily done to express our own, but we can express any of them in one way or another. Now, that's also true of the expressions. So we can express any one of the 72 expressions in the zodiac. It's just that if we have planets within a particular 5-degree batch, then those expressions will be much more readily understood by us, much more readily experienced and expressed by us. And in order to demonstrate how this works, I'm going to acquaint you all, if you don't know already, with the particular Sabian symbols that you have in those expressions. If you remember, when we were doing the Elven star, we're saying that for your sun, you have 7 points. The first Sabian symbol is the degree of the sun, and the other 6 are the septiles from that degree. And we can do that with each of the planets and the angles and so on. So each of us has at least one planet or point or angle or something within the expression that we're studying today. Now, I'm hoping that you all now have the textbook, the Sacred 7 Academy textbook. And within that book, you will see that there are Elven star points. I can probably even give you the page number if I'm a bit more diligent. Yeah, if you go to around page 105 or something, around there, you can see all of the expressions, well, each of the Elven star points described it in its meaning. The point is that I'm making with the earlier analogy is that all of us have this energy within us. Even if we have no planets or points, we have this energy within us because all of us have everything within us potentially. So all of us can learn the lesson that Virgo's teaching about what is conviction. If you want to understand that better, it's very likely that you will by accessing the Elven star point that I've just read out to you. And if you have more than one, probably one is much more obviously central to you. If the moon is in that position, then that's what you're going to focus on, notwithstanding you've got 2 other positions. So you use a bit of common sense, but you can access the expression of conviction most easily through these elven star points. So let's study what conviction is in this context of the energy of Virgo. Now, I know when we study Virgo, what do we think? We think it's an earth sign and we think it's mutable. And it might be that we don't think much else. We might think, well, its ruling planet is said to be Mercury, you know, and you can hear the cynicism in my voice as I speak on that topic. You know, I really don't get every single rulership that's put forward. It just doesn't feel right to me that Virgo is mostly associated with Mercury. It does okay with Mercury in its own way, but not the way that I like. Whereas Gemini with Mercury, I learned something about how Mercury really is. You know, so I don't get that Mercury rules Virgo. Notwithstanding that, it's not only a Mercury ruled mutable earth sign, it is that, and that really does help us focus. Mutable earth, that probably means that it moves things around quite a lot. That sounds like mutable and earthy, doesn't it? Things, earthy, mutable, moving around a lot. Mercury, all the more so. Now, what does it do that with? On a bad day, it does that with silly gossip, and you get a lot of that from the lower order of Mercury operating in Virgo. But on the higher level, it does that with vegetation. You could think of a market gardener as being a very appropriate occupation for Virgo. You know, and so moving things around, that's what you do in gardening and so on. So that level of gardening where they're growing things, especially herbs and good foods and so on. Whereas Taurus, also a very good gardener, is much more likely to be concerned with landscaping. So that fundamental understanding of the zodiac sign is by no means useless, it's by no means wrong, and it's certainly the stepping stone that we need to start thinking correctly about these signs' meaning. However, like a river sometimes goes around and it goes backwards and it goes sideways and it does all sorts of strange things on its journey from source to ocean. The same is true of a zodiac sign, and quite a number of the Sabian symbols seem really counterintuitive within that zodiac sign. They represent principles that you really don't associate with that sign. And the reason is that because when we're doing a zodiac sign, we're looking at the overarching generalization of, roughly speaking, what it means. Virgo is, roughly speaking, mutable and earthy. But the third degree of Virgo is very different. Two angels bringing protection. Doesn't sound either mutable or earthy, does it? You know, not really. It's not the first thing that comes to mind, in my mind anyway. So we're looking at Sabian symbols creating together a bunch which has a single meaning for the bunch, and that meaning is conviction in this case. So we're studying what is conviction, and here we have the first degree is the first lesson of learning what conviction is, and we have to learn what is most significant in our lives. Each of us has that challenge, and we're not given a huge amount of help with it. So until you actually know what's important to you, you can't be convinced of anything, and you can't practice conviction. So unless you make a decision about what's most significant, you're never going to get to the level of conviction. Now, this is associated with Virgo 1, a man's head. That's the image of that Sabian degree. The second wisdom is that whatever it is that you make significant, can you raise that to the level of sacredness? Now, it would be dogmatic of us to say that prayerfulness, devotion to religiosity and so on would be sacred and other things would not be. For some people, Manchester United is their highest appreciation of sacredness. They get into an altered state of consciousness when they score a goal in their football team. And to them, that's sacredness. And I don't think we should question that. So whatever it is that's the most significant thing in your life, you raise to the level of sacredness. That's the second point. And here we have the Virgo 2, the large white cross upraised. So in this case, we're talking Christianity. A Buddhist would do it in his way, a pagan would do it in her way, and so on. When you get that sense of sacredness, what is sacredness? And in this case, we're saying, well, sacredness is where we can access the feeling of light beings. The two angels offering protection. Angels are beings of light. I mean, so are we. There isn't anything else. Everything is made up of light because that's what energy is. Energy and light are synonyms. We use light in spiritual terminology to discuss what scientists call energy. And there is nothing but light. But here we're talking about two angels bringing protection. It's a specific expression of light. The angelic realms, they are considered to be in service to us. They're pure in their nature. We've got a very clear sense of what an angel is. And one could see an angel as being a higher aspect of self. You know, that understanding that we are all God can be dumbed down a bit to the level of archangel and to the level of angel. So we're all archangels as well. We're all angels as well. You know, we've got that access to the source where a little bit of us is angelic, a little bit of us is absolutely divine. And so in this case, we're moving through the operation of what is most sacred to understand how to feel about light beings. And if you open up yourself to a sense of sacredness, you become aware of presence. There's almost a tangible ability that we have to feel what we call beings of light. Who knows what they really are, you know, if we were able to see it with universal consciousness. Now, when we open up that higher dimension of mind so that we can have those perceptions, then the mind is absolutely free of prejudice. And here we have Virgo 4, the black child playing with the white children, freedom from prejudice. The mind is not supposed to know in advance. It's not supposed to prejudge anything. It's supposed to be aware before it starts doing the analysis and the determination about value preferences. In the end, the mind has to judge. The idea that judgment is mine, saith the Lord, that's fair enough, but only when you understand judgment to be blame. That's not what judgment is. It's just the wrong word. When you judge somebody wrong, that's the mistake. But when you're actually judging whether or not this ball is heavier than that ball, that's a value judgment. The value is weight, and this ball is heavier, so that's a better ball if you're valuing weight as more important. You certainly do that when it comes to chocolate. You know, so it's not something that we escape ourselves from. We've all got preferences and they're value judgments. And when we're talking about the black child and the white children, we're saying that we make our judgment about which child is better according to which has the better conversation or which is the better at football or whatever, not according to the color of their skin. That's the point. That's the judgment that we're trying to get away from, where there's prejudice involved. And the mind that has prejudice cannot know stuff. It can't raise itself to the level of sacredness because prejudice is a very heavy energy. Certain thoughts and feelings that we have are so heavy that they do not support spiritual consciousness. So if you take in judgment into your spiritual path, you're going to end up with something which isn't spiritual, and you'll think of it as spiritual. And if you think that's a description of most religions in the world, then I have to agree with you. When we've freed the mind of prejudice through this process, then whatever happens comes to us. We go through the process of visioning reality differently. A man dreaming of fairies, Now, certain people will tell you that fairies do not exist, and other people will tell you that fairies most certainly do exist. And it would be wonderful if your mind can be so open that it can understand that fairies do exist for the people that believe in them. And they don't exist for people that want measurements of how big and powerful and strong and how rich they are. You know, that's what the scientific materialists would want to do, to agree that fairies exist. So there's this state of mind where, yeah, fairies exist if you believe in them. They don't if you don't believe in them. Like everything else, you can get to that level of mental clarity. Now, if you have the ability to put all of these five things together, learn what's most significant to you, awaken to its sacredness, feel, therefore, the light beings that are around you when you know about sacredness, which frees up the mind from any prejudice. You don't judge in advance. Then you move into another dimension. The mind can actually inhabit another dimension. And in that dimension, apparently, fairies exist for certain people. And for you, it might be something else that exists for you and nobody else. I've certainly taken very seriously the task that I set myself of creating a world that I inhabit and nobody else does. I've built this mental model of my other reality so I can play with the symbols and I can gain access to inspiration from a different source, a deeper source, more subtle source. So I don't particularly deal with fairies, but as you all know, I certainly consider elves to be an important part of my reality. And you'll have your business. It doesn't have to be fairies, you know, but whatever it is for you. Um, so we're moving from self-identification as ego to self-identification as whatever you choose, spirit, in the form that you need to place it so that you can understand what it is. The thing is about spirit is that it's ill-defined. Nobody really knows what spirit is. It's stuff that's not material. But each of us will have his own and her own interpretation of what spirit is in terms of our relationship with it. Is it the angelic forces? Maybe. For me, it's the state I get into when I do spiritual chanting and dancing. You know, that's what where spirit is declaring itself to me most clearly. So for me, it has a musical connotation. For other people, it would be a sporting thing when they're in the zone of achieving their best possible outcome. So we're moving into that higher consciousness by doing this series of five exercises, which moves us from identification as the lower order self into identification as the soul. The soul then is not something that we have. The soul is something that has us, but we change our sort of sense of what it means when I say I. So if I say I have an ego, am I talking about James or am I talking about Septimus, which is the name I give my soul? You know, I've got a whole world where my soul has got a name and so on. So I think that Septimus has James as one of his facets of expression. So I don't even see myself as the agency of reality. I see myself as the servant of a higher agency, and that higher agency is personal to me. But there's two other soul siblings that I have for whom it's equally personal to them. I don't really want to get too deeply into that at the moment.